In today's edition of NHL Trade Talk, we're discussing the New York Rangers. The New York Rangers have issued a letter to their fans explaining that they're going to be going through a rebuild. I want to discuss what players do they keep and build around, and what players do they trade away. And that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So let's jump into the New York Rangers. In case you missed it, there was a letter that was released from General Manager Jeff Gorton as well as Glenn Sather from the New York Rangers to their fans that was released through social media indicating that they have not been pleased with the direction of their team and that they're going in a new direction here into the future to try to build towards another Stanley Cup champion. That's going to involve moving out a lot of players that are currently with the organization and that the fans are quite familiar with. So today I wanted to discuss who stays and who do they build around and what players do they try to move on from. Obviously there's been a lot of Ranger speculation in recent weeks, and we've done some other videos discussing some potential trades that they might be looking to make here before the trade deadline or into the summer and the off season. So let's discuss that a little bit further and decide what the Rangers should do here as they move forward. So obviously, first off, let's discuss some of the players that have been speculated for a while now that are likely going to be moved, and then we'll get into who they can stay and build around and go from there. So obviously, the main target of trade speculation right now is Rangers forward Rick Nash. Obviously, he's a pending UFA. He's got a lot of experience. He's a former 30 to 40 goal scorer, and I think he can certainly be a productive, healthy help to another team trying to make a Stanley Cup run. So I think it's definitely going to happen and he gets moved. I know the Rangers asking price appears to be very high. I've heard rumors that they're asking as much for Nash as the Sabres are for Evander Kane. I don't think that's realistic that they're going to get that. But what I do think is realistic is that regardless of what they're asking for today, by the time the trade deadline comes and goes, whatever that best offer is, they're going to have to take it because they clearly want to move on from a lot of these UFAs, and they want to move on and build their team into being a younger, faster, more skilled hockey team. So regardless of what the answer is to what the best deal is for Nash, I think they're going to have to take whatever that is. But I know right now the asking price is pretty high. One of the more recent teams that have come up as a potential suitor for Rick Nash is the Nashville Predators, as well as the Columbus Blue Jackets. I've heard St. Louis Blues. I've heard quite a few teams in there. I think St. Louis is unlikely here for a couple reasons. One, they've made it known a few times they're not really interested in a rental situation. But I think the Predators are a team to keep your eye on. I'm quite sure they're going to want to add a forward of some kind. There's been linked to other names as well besides Nash. But either way, Rick Nash definitely gets traded before the trade deadline. And regardless of what the best offer is, it should bring in a pretty decent haul of a combination of picks, prospects, or young NHL players, or whatever that package ends up being, coming back to the Rangers. Another forward that's likely going to be gone is Michael Grabner. Obviously, he's also a pending UFA. I think there's definitely a few teams like Calgary for one, maybe Winnipeg, as well as maybe a few others too that might make sense. But there's definitely going to be enough interest in Michael Grabner, and I think he definitely gets moved as well. And whatever they get for him, I know it's been rumored they're asking for a first-round pick. I don't know if they get that. I know he's quite fast. He can score lots of goals. But I think on any team he ends up, he's going to probably end up being a bottom six forward. He can be a very valuable bottom six forward, mind you. And he can score lots of goals. He can prove that. He gets lots of breakaways. He's really valuable. But I'm not sure he's going to return a first round pick. I'm thinking maybe a second round pick and a prospect. I don't know exactly what that return ends up being. But either way, he's definitely going to be moved. They have some other pending UFAs I think they would like to move. And if they're not moved, I think they won't be re-signed. But these other guys might be a little bit tougher to move just because there won't be as much of an interest. But if the right deal comes along, they'll definitely be on their way out as well. And we're talking about defenseman Nick Holden. We're talking about forward David Desharnais as well. And we're also talking about goaltender Andrei Pavlik. Those three guys are all pending UFAs, and there's really no future for them, I don't think, in the Rangers organization. So if they can be traded and to get back an asset, I think that's definitely going to happen. And if not, I don't see them back in New York next year. Regardless, but it would be nice for the Rangers, obviously, to recoup something since they're likely falling out of favor there. Now, the other player that I think the Rangers definitely want to move and made it clear yesterday when they placed him on waivers is Brendan Smith. Obviously, last year when they picked him up, he had a really good playoff series. After having a great playoff, he got a nice new contract for the Rangers, and he has not lived up to that as well at all. overall, they have not been happy with how he's played this year, and now he's on waivers. As of the recording of this video, there's still a couple of hours left in the waiver wire for someone to claim him. I highly doubt that happens just because of the contract that gets attached to him. I think if the Rangers are able to move him, they're going to have no choice but to retain some salary. I think that's the only way any teams are going to take him. I think if he's given a different role, maybe a third pairing spot on another team, I think he could probably prolong his career and maybe still be a productive NHLer. But when they assigned him to be a top 4 guy and given the role he's been given, I don't think he's living up to it, and I'm not sure that he's really capable of that. Obviously, there's some other forwards that they've been highly speculated that they want to move. I think these are more likely to get done after the season, but you never know. These are some attractive players, and teams might pony up the price here in order to get them for the playoff run. So we're talking about Ryan McDonagh and Marc Zuccarello. As I mentioned in a video the other day, the most likely scenario right now for McDonagh, from what we've heard for all the different rumors, is the team that's showing a lot of interest is Tampa. So Tampa and the New York Rangers have a history of doing some deals, and I think he could work in Tampa. Now, whether or not that happens, I don't know, but I think it is possible. I think there's going to be lots of talks, but if these guys, between him and Zuccarello, if they're not traded by the deadline, I think that the Rangers will continue to work something out so that they can move those guys in the summer. So it seems like, really, if you look at all the guys I just mentioned, I would be surprised if any of those guys return to the New York Rangers for next year. Now, another player that I think we can put a question mark on for next year is Marc Staal. I mean, is Marc Staal a player that fits into this team for the future? It's hard to say, really. I mean, he's 31 years old. He still has 3 years left on his contract. You know, he's still a decent defenseman. Last summer, when they did the buyout of Dan Girardi, it was widely speculated they were considering doing the same with Marc Staal. That didn't happen. So is that something that we might see this summer? Hard to say. I mean, I'm not sure that it's not really a slight on Staal, but considering his age and his contract, I'm not sure if that's really a player. Is he going to want to stick around for one and go through a rebuild? And secondly, are they going to want to maybe make room for some younger players? Obviously, they do need a few veterans around, so maybe Staal stays. But for me, he's at least a question mark. I don't know if there's going to be a highly much of a market for a trade for him, but you know, do they consider maybe doing a buyout like they did with Girardi? Something to consider for sure. Leave me some comments down below. Do you think Marc Staal might be a guy that might be on the way out? Hard to say. Now, there's a few other forwards as well that I think for me are question marks. I mean, if you're a Rangers fan, let me know how you feel about these other guys down in the comments. I'm not sure. I mean, they could be players that stay and are part of the solution here, and they could be guys that might be moved as well. So I'm talking about Kevin Hayes, I'm talking about JT Miller, and I'm talking about Chris Kreider. Now, right now, I think Chris Kreider would probably generate the best return on a trade. Right now, it's debatable whether or not he goes by the deadline because he's currently out with injuries. Obviously, he's having those issues with the blood clot. He had to have a surgery. Hard to say if Kreider gets moved or not before the deadline, but if not, as we go into the summer and we look at the guys like Miller and Hayes and Kreider, they're certainly not old guys by any means, but they would start to become like the elder statesmen of the team with a lot of these other guys being moved out. So they could be part of the older nucleus of the team, or they could be moved out as well because they're young enough that they could return more assets. I'm not sure how the Rangers organization is going to feel about those guys. I don't think any of them are really top guys. I mean, Kreider can definitely be like a second line player. And Kevin Hayes and JT Miller, they're very versatile, Miller especially. But, you know, you can put Hayes in a second line, maybe a third line role. There's a lot of question marks there. I just don't know how the Rangers are going to feel about these guys. So let me know in the comments, do you think they stay or do they go? Now, another big question mark for me is goaltender Henrik Lundqvist. I mean, I know he's made it publicly known that he doesn't want to leave New York and he loves it there. But here's a couple things to consider. One, by the end of the season, he's going to be 36 years old. Two, he's got 3 years left on his contract at $8.5 million. Three, he's obviously, because of all that, nearing the end of his career. Does he want to win a Stanley Cup? Absolutely. He's one of the best goaltenders in the league who's never been able to do that, and I'm sure that's something that he really, more than anything, wants to accomplish before his time is up. Now, will he play out his full 3 years of his contract or beyond? It's hard to say. Hopefully, for his sake, he can complete that contract, but by the time the contract's finished, he's going to be 39 years old, and it's highly unlikely that his career continues beyond that. So time's ticking on Henrik Lundqvist, and is he going to want to go through a rebuild? I mean, we've seen plenty of cases with Hank in the last few years even, where it seems like, you know, in the playoffs, especially last year, he seems to be very impatient at times, and it's mainly because of his desire to win. So because of that, is that something he's going to really want to go through? I wouldn't expect him to come out with them in the media right now in the middle of a season to be like, yeah, if they're going to do a rebuild, I don't want to be around for that. You might as well trade me. I don't expect that to happen. He's never going to say something like that in the public, not at this point in time. And really, the other thing is that even if they want to trade him, I think it's a difficult deal to move, contract to move. I mean, he's making $8.5 million, a 36-year-old goaltender. Even though he's had a ton of success and he's proven this year he can still play at a high level. So does another team take a look at that? Maybe. It's debatable. I'm not sure how the organization or the player will feel about that. But leave some comments down below as well. Do the Rangers consider moving Lundqvist, and would he even want to stick around for a rebuild? If this is going to take 2 or 3 years to get back up to a high level, his time might be up and his career might be over and he may not have that chance to get a Stanley Cup. So let me know what you think down below. As far as who do you build around, well, they certainly have some good prospects coming up, and we're going to get to the prospects here in just a moment. But if you look at the core players that they could build around right now, they have a couple of really good defensemen to kind of start with, and that's Kevin Shattenkirk and Brady Shea. Obviously, they just gave Shattenkirk a 4-year deal this past season, and he's done fairly well. I mean, right now he's out injured, but for the most part, I think when he's played in the Rangers uniform this year, he's looked pretty good. Brady Shea, to me, definitely has the ability to be a top-pairing defenseman. He's probably their long-term, anyways, their best defensive prospect going forward. And like I said, maybe Marc Staal's a question mark for me. I don't know if he stays or he goes. I mean, it could go either way with me. If he does stay, they could certainly use some veterans back there because they're going to have to bring in, more likely at least, some younger prospects to kind of fill up that blue line. And, obviously somebody's going to be back there. So maybe Staal stays. I don't know. But Brady Shea and Kevin Shattenkirk are great defensemen to start building around, and they do have some good defensive prospects coming up as well that are hopefully take a spot for next year. As far as the forward group goes, well, you get Mika Zibanejad, who's your #1 center. He's still pretty young, has a good contract for another 4 years. You got Pavel Buchnevich. I mean, he's still pretty young as well. He's only in his 2nd year. He's looking pretty solid, so you definitely build around him. You got Jimmy Vesey, who's looking for a bigger role all the time. Obviously, Vesey more than likely sticks around as well. So you got those 3 guys right there. I mean, those are some core nucleus players. You've also got Jesper Fast. I think Jesper Fast is definitely a guy that sticks around. So you get a group of 4 forwards, 2 defensemen. For me, those are guys that definitely stay and become part of the new core nucleus with the Rangers. And the rest of it, for me, like I said, there's guys that are almost definitely going out the door. And then there's some guys for me that are question marks. But, obviously, like players like Miller and Hayes, they're definitely question marks. They don't have to go, but they could try to see what they get back for assets just to keep retooling. Now, the good news is with the New York Rangers is they have some great prospects coming up. And it's going to help this team a ton. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see, at the very least, some of these guys are going to get playing time this year before the season is out. It only makes sense for the Rangers to do that, to kind of be able to better evaluate what they have going forward. I think it's safe to say their top prospect, well, really 2, is Elias Anderson and Philip Cheadle. Cheadle's already got a few games under his belt. He's currently playing in the American Hockey League, and he's definitely going to be a forward that gets a lot of ice time here coming up next year. And Elias Anderson is recently the captain of the Swedish World Junior Hockey Team. It's a fantastic prospect. He's definitely got high-end talent. And those 2 guys, I think, could definitely eat up top 6 minutes, which is why I think there's potential here that maybe guys like Hayes and Miller or even Kreider might possibly be moved to give those guys the ice time. I don't know, but I want to know what you think. But those prospects, let me know what you think of them. I think they're Anderson and Cheadle are definitely fantastic prospects. Now, the other question around Henrik Lundqvist is obviously they do have an up-and-coming goaltender who they need to get signed, but he is looking fantastic, and you're going to have a chance to watch him here if you watch the 2018 Olympic Hockey Tournament that's coming up here starting here in a few days. And there is going to be an Olympic Hockey preview video coming out where I'm going to discuss this goaltender a little bit further, so stay tuned for that. So the Rangers goalie prospect is Igor Shesterkin, playing in the KHL, and he looks phenomenal. His stats over there are fantastic. He's 22 years old, and as we all know, a lot of goalies really don't come into their own. They're typically a later bloomer than the defense and forwards. And he looks awesome now. He's been drafted for a few years now, and they need to get him signed under contract to be able to retain his rights and work on getting him into a New York uniform. But with a player like that coming up, it certainly gives hope that, and also gives another reason to consider maybe Lundqvist. And if Lundqvist does stick around, maybe he stays around for 1 more year. Maybe they bring him in, Shesterkin in, to maybe be the backup next year if that's possible. Let him learn the ropes, get some playing time, and maybe Hank moves on the year after. I don't know. But either way, with a goalie prospect like that in the wins, it certainly gives you something to think about. and it's definitely a lot to be excited about. Obviously, they also have a couple defensive prospects who have actually seen some playing time this year. I still kind of consider them prospects because they haven't played a whole lot. But Anthony DeAngelo and Neil Pionk, it definitely looks like they're pretty solid defensive prospects, and I would not be completely surprised if they both get full-time spots on the roster for next season. But a lot going on in New York. I'm not sure how Rangers fans are feeling about it, but certainly leave some comments down below. Do you think this is a wise move for the Rangers? Are they going in the right direction here? And what would you like to see the team get back as they move out a lot of these players for future assets? Obviously, there's a lot of good young players in this league that might be available for trade. There's obviously a very deep draft coming up in 2018, so there's a possibility if they can get it back, they have their own first-round pick, which is going to be up higher in the rankings. Plus, you're going to possibly get back at least one more from all these moves. They might be able to snag themselves a couple more top guys out of this draft. Plus, with what they've got coming, this may not take very long to retool and make this team more competitive again. So certainly leave lots of comments and let me know what you think about the Rangers' moves here. Do you think the Rangers' prospects have a lot to be excited about? And what do you think the return should be on a lot of these guys possibly going out the door? Don't forget as well to follow us on Twitter. You're going to see our Twitter handle on the screen right here. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and all of those accounts are linked in the description down below. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.